Welcome to all the participants and welcome to SaaS Talks edition 17. We never thought we'll get this far, but we just seem to have continued to chug along this path. Also would like to welcome both Rishen and Sanket, and I'll introduce them in a minute. But just the I guess, few things that I repeat at the beginning of every SaaS Talks. This is not meant to be a panel. This is not meant to be a rags to riches story. This is meant to be a discussion on a how-to on a very specific topic, right? Hopefully the intent is that you walk away from this with something new learned that you can apply to your business tomorrow. That's the intent, right? We pick a different topic each time. And the way this is conducted is that the first 10 to 12 minutes is what Arpit and I end up dominating. We ask our questions to set the stage for that particular topic. But thereafter, it is an open discussion. And of course, we initially thought we'll have a roundtable discussion. That roundtable is not possible in the current times. And also it's not possible with the number of people that are there. And therefore, as we go along this path, please use the Q&A panel. And I repeat, only the Q&A panel, not the chat panel for any of your questions. Number two, keep the questions relevant to the topic, not outside of it. I'm sure that if you have topics, you can make that request to us. We continuously collate these topics and decide the next topic for SaaS Talks based on these. So with that, let me first introduce the topic and then the two anchor guests that we have today. So I'll first of all confess that I come from the big bad world of enterprise sales, which basically means that I'm used to 6 month, 1 month, and even 2 year long sales cycles that I've seen in my past, right? You show up on these very many dinners, meetings, blah, blah, blah. You try to charm your way through. Sometimes you go through even 4 months negotiation cycle. In the end, you get a signature on paper and God help you in collecting that cash later. In the last few years, we have seen some very different beat. All the way, actually, I would argue that when companies like Dropbox, etc., came around, and one of my close friends, actually, someone that I worked with for many years, is now the CEO of HubSpot. I was speaking to her as well. She told me as to how much, and she used to sell multi-million-dollar deals, and how much the world has changed in the way they take HubSpot to market, which is that it's a product that actually sells itself through different kinds of hooks and not actually a sales team. There was a recent SaaS Boomi McKinsey report that also had a graphic on how the market cap of product-led growth companies has grown at a much faster clip than the rest of the companies. And Rishen, I remember you published an article on Calendly growth, and I may have even missed some other articles, but I remember reading that one. So there have been lots of discussions, and I also want to point out that I don't think there is a single board in SaaS that I sit on today where we have not had at least one, maybe a lot more discussions on product-led growth. Doesn't matter even if these were targeting very large enterprises, actually. Right? That's the speed at which this thing has come around. We will discuss today what it means. When should you use it? What does it take to make it successful? And with that, I think two speakers I want to introduce. One is Sanket. And I think people are used to my regret stories on every single SaaS Talks. I think I've made it a pattern that at least one of the guests is someone that we should have invested behind and made the mistake of not to. Sanket knows how close we came, and this was back in 2017. But Sanket is the co-founder and CEO of InVideo. Sanket, delighted to see how rapidly you guys have grown and what you guys have done. And I also remember that you have pivoted in that journey, and we'll come to that in a minute shortly here. Rishen actually, and I have shared a board in the past. And Rishen is from Sequoia, but recently decided that to hell with VC. I know that I can build a successful SaaS company, and guess what? A SaaS company that is targeting product-led growth as its theme in some sense. And I will let him describe beyond this because I'm going to fall off the cliff if I try any further. So I couldn't have expected any two better anchor guests for today's call. So Rishen and Sanket, thank you so much for being part of SaaS Talks number 17.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you so much for having us.
No, likewise. So Rishen, I'm going to kick it off with you. I have got 10 minutes as my time. Clearly, I mean, no secrets. You love PLG. You won't be building a company around it otherwise, right? But I have seen very many versions of PLG, frankly, even with the best of investors and the best of entrepreneurs on the boards in the last 1 year. I would actually love for you to tell us, when you use the word PLG, what does it actually mean to you? And is it the same thing as freemium, free trials, etc., or are we talking something which is a different animal here?
No, I think that's a fair question. Alok, what I'd like to say over here is that to truly understand PLG and the hysteria and the excitement that's behind it, you need to understand what's happening in the market. And that kind of lends itself well into answering what PLG really is. So would you mind if we started there?
Yeah, sure. Please go ahead.
Okay, awesome, right? So Alok, if you look at the last decade, right, the way in which products and services have been purchased and consumed by both businesses and consumers has changed, right? The one secular trend that's kind of played out over the last decade is that the distance between the buyer and user of software has only decreased year on year. So if we take you back, perhaps like, let's say 10 years in time, any purchase decision that's made by a business, for example, whether it be a marketing automation software, a CRM, a database, whatever it might be, right? That decision was more often than not taken by VPs or CXOs sitting in a corner office, even if the end user of said application or service was a product manager or a designer or a marketer, right? Over the last 10 years, that distance has now shrunk. And I think over the last 2 or 3 years, we've reached a point where the buyer and user of software is the same, right? It's the product manager who decides she wants to use Jira. It's the marketer who decides she wants to use InVideo. It's the sales executive who decides she wants to use Slintel. Now, given that the buyer and user of software is the same, the motion that lends itself best to addressing this is where you allow people to try your software before they buy your software.
Yeah.
And this try before you buy is what's colloquially called as PLG, and which is where freemium and self-service is kind of emerging from, right? But that's why this entire thing is happening in my mind, at least, right? Now, once you've gotten to this point, a business, its core imperative is to basically remove friction from the path that lives in a customer's life to, number one, find your software, number two, get onboarded onto it, number three, see value on it, right? And you as a business basically have to remove that friction. And that could even be pricing for that matter. Like that is even one more friction point that you have to remove from it.
Yeah.
Now, businesses that are doing this and are basically putting their product as the protagonist at every step in the funnel, whether it be to acquire users, whether it be to engage users, whether it be to convert users, those are product-led businesses for me. The entire freemium and self-service motion that you see is just a manifestation or an outcome on the surface. But the underlying engine that's making it hum is this removal of friction.
Understand. Thank you, Rishen. Sanket, I remember that when we were speaking to you back in 2017, you had some very large customers. You were even selling to some large media houses, etc. Something clearly changed and you pivoted your direction completely, right? So I think for the benefit of the audience, because they will be interpreting your comments later in our discussion in that light, would be useful for people to understand what is your product for whom today? And what does PLG mean in your context?
Okay. So InVideo today allows anyone to create promo videos, video ads, social media videos. Our users are usually small businesses, small agencies, solopreneurs, teachers, etc. They use us again to create video ads, promo videos, social media content, basically low to medium production value content. Yeah, those are the users. And basically, the question is, why did we switch or not? I'm sorry, I missed it. Why did we switch from enterprise?
Actually, I'm more curious to understand what does PLG mean in your context, actually.
Yeah, okay. So it's simple, in my opinion, right? Products built for the end user. There was a CIO context to software in the past. Then there was exec level context. And then we are moving to end user level context, right? And when a product is built completely for an end user, and keeping them in mind, that products would be different, their journeys would be different, and essentially that is what PLG is. And then you layer everything else after that. Once you make it easy for that particular use case or product to be used in that particular journey. So any product that is built for end user first, and those are and will lead to bottoms up adoption, largely will become a product led motion.
I want to push that line a little bit more because I think both of you have made that point. But look, I would argue that, for example, in my sales career, which had nothing to do with SaaS also, by the way, I must have sold at least somewhere $300 to $400 million worth of software in license across a 10-year period, right? But I agree. I never met an end user. I was selling totally at the executive level during the project.
Yeah.
But if you take a SaaS company today, I would argue most of them also have to worry about the end user because these software are renewed every single year. And if it is not adopted by the end users, you can have as much executive relationship as you have. You will not be able to renew. So that end user focus comes even in non-product led growth. I'm trying to understand what is so different about product led growth and the category that it represents.
No, correct. So I will answer that. So first answer is that there are a set of businesses that can be PLG businesses. In fact, for example, in my opinion, Toplyne will most likely never be a PLG business easily. Very tough. Amplitude, CleverTap cannot be PLG businesses. Right? It requires huge setup. It requires buy-in from like several parties, and that is what can't work. So there is a market size context, there is a business type context, and then the use case context where you can apply this. You can't. It's not a blanket rule that can be applied to any company very easily. The second part is when you are creating a product that is led for bottoms up adoption.
Yeah.
You think in a very consumerish fashion because your activation becomes very important. Look, when you're selling it to an exec, and now to achieve adoption, you can have client success manager, you can have engagement managers, you can go to their offices, you can teach them. Now you don't have the leeway to do that. They are very, feature first product. Basically, I think the conversations would be around, let's build the feature. This customer needs it. It's a large ticket size customer. Yep. We don't have to worry about the product design, the usability of it. We'll teach them. Okay? But here you don't have the chance to teach them because the barrier to entry is overall very less, right? Mostly people are basically trying 2 products, 3 products, 1 product. And then the product should work. And then you are taking care of the journey of where is the user landing? What should I show to the user? How should I onboard it? Is the user getting activated? So a lot more energy also goes around those decisions. So it's a slightly different DNA as compared to it.
Agreed.
You can't, and also the cost, at least to start with. And then companies evolve to adjust use cases, and with significant adoption, they would layer enterprise sales on.
Understand. Actually, Rishen, I am keen to ask you a question back, but before that, I'm going to share my screen, which I've never done in any other SaaS talk, but I'm taking the liberty right now. That's because we did a poll over the last 24 hours, right? And I kid you not, I am totally zapped by the outcome. Because, just now Sanket took very many examples, including Toplyne and CleverTap and many others, saying that, look, they are not going to be PLG because you need to take a buy-in at a larger organizational level. There's a lot of setup required, blah, blah, blah. If you look at this chart, and maybe there is a bias in terms of who responded in the first place, possible, right? But you look at the chart, it says that only 10% of the respondents, and it was a very short poll, so 70 companies are the ones who responded. Only 10% said that it is not relevant. 15% are thinking a shift. 53% are in initial stages, and 22%, which is actually a very high number in my opinion, which are in mature stages of PLG as per their own admission, right? Which surprises the hell out of me, by the way. But Rishen, I am keen to take the thought forward from Sanket. Is there a list of criteria that you can put saying that, look, this is a framework for thinking, right? If you look at these 1, 2, 3, 4 criteria, based on what these criteria tell you, you should decide whether PLG is the motion to go or SLG, which is sales-led growth, is the motion to go.
So, just to begin with, I think Sanket and I have debated and discussed this multiple times, and we have a difference of opinion over here. For me, there's a difference between a bottoms-up company and a product-led company. So something like a Clever Tap or an Amplitude can be product-led. The difficulty that they will face in becoming product-led might be a lot more than what something like a Figma faces, for example.
Yeah.
They still have the ability to do so. It's just a lot harder for them to do because of the buy-in that's required and the technical complexity in implementation.
Right.
The second one is, for me, a product-led motion does not mean you don't have a sales-led motion or a marketing-led motion. Product-led growth is a way for you to dramatically expand your top of the funnel. How you choose to convert them at the bottom of the funnel, it could be sales, it could be marketing, it could be the product itself, it could be a combination thereof, right? Like, for example, if you look at Figma, which is a shining light when it comes to product-led growth companies, right? I think a little over 45% of its revenue comes through sales. It does not come through the product itself. And if we forecast 5 years into the future, I'm quite confident that number will actually be closer to 60 to 65%, right? So I think they actually go hand in hand. Now, to your specific question in terms of what are the criteria that go in my mind, at least, on whether someone can be product-led or not, the way I think about it is a company has to earn the right to become product-led, right? And the right to become product-led comes from the fact that can you show value to your users in a very short amount of time? Like if value from your product is coming 4 months into implementation, then it's very hard for you to become a product-led company because you can't expect someone to go hammer and tongs at your product for a period of 4 months and then see value later. Right?
Correct.
Your product needs to be that seamless that training is not required, which means your UX needs to be understandable. So for me, documentation, UX, time to value is probably up there as the number one thing, right?
Correct.
That's what earns you the right to become product.
Correct. Gratification cycle for the user, like how getting the user to that aha moment faster.
Yeah.
That user.
Got it.
Time to gratification.
Even if you look at InVideo, right, like there's such a large push on templates because that just reduces the gratification cycle, right? People don't have to start from scratch. They've got a library of world-class templates to work with, and you can log in and within 15 minutes, you have a high quality video that's available to be distributed. If that gratification cycle was even a few hours or, God forbid, a few days, it would have been that much harder.
So, or for example, if the gratification cycle required API integration to collect the data, right? And then it would be difficult for it to become a bottoms-up adoption.
Understand. I know that I have run out of my time here already, and I don't think I've seen as many questions come up on the Q&A panel on anything before that Arpit and I have done. So we are going to shift to the questions, but I want to make a couple of comments to all the participants here, which is that we try to replicate as much we can of around the table. So if any of you have a question, you should also feel free to raise your hand and we'll bring you in. Number one. Number two, while of course I knew Sanket and I knew Rishen, but if some of you have a lot of experience in product-led growth, don't be shy. Actually, just join the screen here with other people. This is meant to be, as I said, a discussion. This is not a panel here. But of course, if you feel more comfortable with the Q&A panel, please go with that. I can already see that we will be able to cover at best just a small percentage of the questions which are coming today. So we will still try to do our best to cover as many as we can. I'm going to shoot off with one. And Arpit, in the meantime, you can pick your favorite amongst these next time, which is that, and I think Rishen, you already touched upon this, but this is a question from an anonymous attendee. PLG emphasizes more on inbound and organic adoption. I lost the question, Arpit, you already removed it. But once you have the top of the funnel, what is the way that the actual conversion happens from that top of the funnel to the bottom of the funnel?
I can speak to this, but I think few better than Sanket to answer this question. See, for me, you have a few weapons in your arsenal to convert users once you've acquired them, right? Actually, let's take a step back, right? At the end of the day, you want to convert someone who's qualified, right? Now, your qualification can either happen through marketing, or it can happen through sales, or it can happen through your product itself. And it basically goes in that order of intent. A marketing qualified lead in traditional parlance was someone who comes from a segment that you care about and has given you contact information. A sales qualified lead is a marketing qualified lead that also has intent to buy, right? A product qualified lead is a marketing qualified lead that also happens to be sales qualified and has a use case and is using your product today, right? So as you're moving down the funnel, your leads tend to become a lot more qualified. And that's really what the PLG funnel unlocks for you. Now, once you've qualified these leads, you have a few weapons in your arsenal to kind of convert them. You've of course got your paywall, which is a very powerful weapon, but it's also a two-sided sword in some ways. If your paywall is too far in someone's, like Sanket, actually, I think you should continue from here. You're probably the best person to answer this.
Yeah. So look, Alok, it depends on what's the North Star for that quarter and what is the strategy of the company, right? You cannot ignore the strategy of the company because monetization and engagement and growth are inversely proportional during the early days for the most companies.
Yeah.
Okay. So for example, you want to monetize more, you will push the paywalls, you will see the engagement dip and you see the conversion rate go up.
Yeah.
Right. You change those levers and again it changes. So it has to be taken in the context of the business, that how large is my business? Am I still in the distribution phase or am I still in a monetization phase? In fact, if you look at Canva today, whatever is marketed, but you will hit paywalls probably 5 times in a session versus once in five sessions in say 4 years back. So clearly they have clearly moved that, right? So, but why have they moved that? Because they're like very closer to monopoly. So now there is a time to monetization, because engagement is also directly proportional to the word of mouth growth and all your other channels, affiliates, etc., that will come into play. So these are trade-offs that you take depending on the stage of the company. The end state most likely is to layer it with the sales team. The only caveat here is sales team will have much more highly qualified leads. Few examples here in the funnel are, so there is a product-led sales, right? So you go, you hit a paywall, you buy it and you wrap it up. Then there are other paywalls where, you are seeing 5 people from CNBC India or 10 people from CNBC US using your product across the board, things like that, right? That is when you start layering it with an enterprise sales team, right? And that is when you add more value and add all the enterprise features. Now, the reason why it's very difficult to do it in the early stage from my experience is because we today, at least at InVideo, do not focus on enterprise features because we are only focusing on activation. Like if you say that most energy goes into how do we improve activation, and we don't build anything that's related to enterprise. Like for example, they will require a single, they will require an SSO. So a bunch of things, right? They will require a customer support team. They might require some additional features. We don't do that. So there is a journey where you will, I think most likely, you will start with people hitting paywall and starting to use the product. Then eventually you will start looking at your users and say that, can I handhold them in certain journeys? Then you will build some more features, which will allow you to say that, oh, if a user is using this and this, means that person should be qualified to be sold today. In our context, for example, if a person is adding multiple brands, okay, then they are an agency or they're a large company with multiple brands, which means we should sell them, right? So that is how you do that. And then there can be much deeper parts with respect to who should see what, which is you look at what do users do in the first few days that leads to retention. So you can almost predict early on that a user will retain because the behavior of the users who have retained was this, right? For us, for example, it is 2 videos created in the first 14 days. Basically your retention line should start flatlining a bit. Right? So you will start creating those muscles and then decide that you should go after overall. And then several factors, right? Geography, then like you can change price. Several, like there are probably like 10 other parameters that you will start looking at.
So basically, there are several weapons that you have in your arsenal to convert these, users you've gotten near top of the funnel. There's product-led sales, which is essentially a paywall. There's the sales assist motion, which is people who are on the fence. Can you nudge them with either customer success or a sales demo just to get them onto the left side, which is high velocity sales. And then you've kind of got the enterprise sales motion, which you can layer on once you have that maturity.
Understand.
But by the way, like I want to add a point. I mean, there's some reading that I've done in the past and things like that, and we at InVideo are on the verge of changing those things. Product-led growth companies usually do one thing extremely well, and they're very, very high quality, good to use products on product design and everything. And I think as a country, like that is a muscle that we are not very good at. And I'm just putting it out because hoping that there are other people who don't build. The more you build, the more you have to clean up, and it becomes a journey. So basically, they do one thing extremely well, better than everyone else. And I think top example is Loom. Like Vimeo has it. There's 10 other companies who does screen recording. Loom nails it with respect to design, user experience, and the product. And we are making that shift. I don't think we can grow if we don't make that shift.
Got it. I have one question, and I think it's maybe 2 or 3 questions combined in that Q&A list. If you think of the early stage of your product-led growth companies, where you're more focused on distribution, I would argue, at least what are the metrics that you track, or what are North Star metrics to see if things are working or not? And one additional nuance at least is, one could argue a lot of this is very consumerish in nature, and less enterprise and more consumerish. So are there specific metrics which are different to a traditional consumer business that one needs to be more wary of, that start to stand out?
Yeah. There are. There are, right? So number one, I think, is use case frequency. So understanding the natural use case frequency of your business is very important. And that, so basically, like, we'll look at churn in a very traditional way overall, but there are several companies with high churn who are killing it with respect to revenue. And that's also because of natural use case frequency. So those are the parameters. So number one, you want to know your natural use case frequency so that you can predict churn rate and things like that. But the most important part during the early days should be activation. Activation. Now, activation is, again, activation can be a buzzword. It is essentially getting a user to a core value prop, getting the user to gratification. And in that journey, several users will not get to gratification. An example of that is, like, you start creating a SurveyMonkey survey or a Typeform survey, you don't finish it, you don't publish it. Right? So those are, in the early days, those are the areas of focus every company should have for, and I'm pretty sure about it. I've spoken to large number of people, and it just that is where it should stop, like during the early days.
Understood.
I want to take forward Arpit's question, and there are some variations of that here on the screen as well, which is that if you take, and I'm just cooking up my terminology here, but let's say new users come at the very top of your funnel, whether that's an app download or something else. Some people end up registering. Some people then end up using it actually for the first time, right? Let's say SurveyMonkey, I actually complete my first full survey out of it or something like that. All the way to the point where someone actually converts to a paid user, doesn't matter how low that monthly revenue, even if it's a $5 a month revenue, right? If you were to take that shape of the funnel, are there any guidelines you can give to people here saying that, look, this smells like a right conversion, wrong conversion, and if there are 2-3 stages of this, what would those numbers look like?
I mean, look, Slack, we all know, has cracked it to like 30% conversion, if I'm not wrong. But ideally, I have spoken to founders at Weebly, Buffer. I can speak for myself. I've studied Canvas data closely. It will range from 1 to 3%, largely.
Understand.
The median product-led company actually has a sub 5% conversion rate today. Yeah. So whether it be a Canva, Figma, any of these companies, they actually have a sub 5% conversion rate. And with 5 also, I'm being very, very generous. 80% of them would actually have sub 2.5%, right? Yeah. So if 100 users are signing up, you can call it maybe 35 to 40% of them will activate. But by the time you get to the bottom of the funnel, it's going to be sub 5 users that are converting.
But I'll tell you, Rishen, I'll argue there, right? So the problem is, That is because we look at M0 and M1. You have to look at M18 of a cohort in these businesses.
Take it 5-7% whatever resurrection by then.
I'm not talking about resurrection, right? Like overall conversion will look smaller, but you can hit a 4-5%, 5 or more than 5% conversion. For example, Figma would hit, most likely it would start hitting 15% conversion. If we look at a 3-year-old cohort today.
Yeah, like if time is infinite and a business is going to win the market, they'll get to 100% conversion eventually.
Time is not infinite, but basically we can't look at M0s of such.
Yeah. Agree with you.
Sanket, as another benchmark, and you would have spoken to a lot more people, I believe for Dropbox, this used to be 2% for the longest time. But I'm interested in another metric. I know you have given the end conversion metric.
Yeah.
I'm also curious from the number of people who come, who sort of maybe download or sign up, whatever, to the percentage of people that actually become active users. I think many people on the call today would have been Dropbox users, for an example, never paid for it because the free version works for them, right?
Yeah.
But they're still active users of it. Is there any, I mean, because that's a step before somebody's ever going to pay you. So is there any guideline from, even in a completely free version of the product, to what percentage become active users?
Tough to generalize. Very tough to generalize. On the top of my head, I would say 25 to 35%, but tough to generalize.
And that's
We'll activate. So we'll go through a aha moment, right? And then probably, tough to answer that question. Tough to answer that question because of the context of the business. Like it's, if it's a chat application, it's very different. For us, it will be very different. It is tough to just answer that.
This is where I think the frequency or the natural frequency of that product comes into the picture. If it's high frequency, you'd expect that number to be a lot higher. If it's low frequency, your churn would be massive. But as Sanket points out, if your product is good, your long-term resurrection and thereby conversions would be high.
Correct. One actually very important thing, another thing for product-led companies is identifying the right growth channels. Most PLG companies cannot crack performance at scale very, very early. So it's quite important to understand the channel of users. Like what are the potential acquisition channels? And spending time on the depth of those channels are very important as well.
Sorry, can you give an example? Can you give an example of what this means?
There's analogy to our business here, but Canva is of course a much sexier business here right now. So if you look at Canva, 7-8% monthly churn. All VCs should, at least all Indian VCs should run away, right? I mean, good in the early days. But then what channel were they growing from, and are they able to maintain a particular quick ratio, which is like if they're losing a customer, are they getting 3 more? And what is the resurrection to that?
Yeah.
So, but if Canva grew on the back of SEO largely, because of the depth that the keywords have, huge depth keywords have, right? If Canva had to grow without SEO, I don't think early CAC and LTV would have made sense. It would have made sense at some point in their journey, not very early when the product had rough edges. So growth becomes very difficult unless you can crack channels, and those channels can be loops, they can be SEO, but they cannot, most likely they cannot be performance. Again, early on, as business matures, I think it can be, because you have adjacent use cases. There are few things falling in place where you can start losing. You're doing brand building. You're probably going deep in a particular use case why the conversion is increasing. There's several reasons, but early on it becomes different.
I have a very specific follow-on question for something that you mentioned earlier, which was around the importance of good UX or design, and why that, at least that is not necessarily, you refer to the fact that talent for that is not necessarily easily available in India. And so first, was that the right interpretation that I had? That was hard for us?
Okay, so I think, by the way, it's not entirely true, because I think basically, for example, I think Swiggy is the best mobile food delivery app in the world, right? So with respect to user experience, and again, that's my personal biases, but it is really that. So yeah, but do we lack talent across the board? We definitely do, across functions.
No,
For PLG companies.
Sorry, where I was going was, I remember you and I, when we had spoken, and when you were making your transition from relatively more enterprise focused to more, user focused at the end, right? And I remember you had found a designer based in London, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, he works with us.
So actually,
we got him back. Yeah, we got him back.
How important do you think is that investment in UX and design, and any just pieces of advice for people on how to go about it?
User experience is very important. I think like you want to build less, you want to solve one problem, and you want to do a 10x job at that problem. And that 10x job means taking care of every small interaction. And of course, this will only work if you have picked the right problem. But just every interaction, every touch point is completely ironed out. By that, I mean the user experience, the copy, the infrastructure. The product should just work. It just works.
There are so many alternatives available, Arpit, today, right? Like if someone's not using your software, they'll use something else. So people aren't as forgiving today as they would have been, call it 6-7 years ago. So you just don't have the luxury of saying, okay, I'll make it better tomorrow.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more, Rishen. I grew up in the days when some people buy software and then for 2 years it's lying on a shelf. And even when you begin to use it, you need to be a PhD to use it. I agree. Those days are gone. Those days are completely gone. There is a question here again by anonymous attendee, which says, how does the product marketing function evolve in the era of PLG? And is it very different than what it would be in a classical sales level?
Yeah, I haven't cracked it. I don't know. I'm trying very hard to crack it. We have let go of two or three product marketing folks till now in the journey in last 1.5-2 years.
But Sanket, do you think the role of product marketing has changed for PLG? Like the role of product marketing is, let's say, positioning and education, right? At its highest level. So do you think it's actually even changed in a PLG company? The tactics used could be different in PLG vis-a-vis traditional.
I don't know. I mean, again, I'll tell you the problem, right? The one problem, and again, I think in 5-7 years is going to change. Because companies like InVideo and several others are going to crop up, and those people are going to learn. And after they learn, they are going to join new companies where they are going to bring in the learnings. For example, there's certain things that we have cracked. Like what have we cracked? I think we have largely cracked blogs. We know that we'll write a blog, it will rank. We know that we'll create a landing page, it will rank. Again, top 6-7 in the world, most likely. Right? So we have cracked certain parts, and then we have cracked certain parts of looking at data, and it will all fall in place. But it has been tough. It has been tough because we haven't seen enough cycles of how to look at data, why to look at it in a certain way. There's no someone been there, done that, who can just tell you, hey, this is how you do it. And that will change in next 5-7 years. For example, we'll learn it the hard way that I'm learning it the hard way that we cannot only be feature centric. Performance is a feature. Okay. So I think
I'd actually love to hear from the person that asked the question, why do they think the role of product marketing is changing in PLG companies?
Yeah, I know that actually this is throwing it back to the anonymous attendee. If they would like to volunteer and come here on the screen, do that. While they are thinking about this, I want to actually build on the question first. That, in general, when you think about a product-led growth, the product itself gives a lot of nudges for customers to move along the journey, sometimes become even paid customers, and even if they are paid customers, actually become a larger customer, right? Slack, etc., are also great examples. So is Dropbox, and we have seen many of these examples. Who plays the growth function role? Is it now the product manager? Is it the product marketing person? Are we combining all of these roles into one? Where does that role lie in this process?
Lines are definitely blurred. Several companies that I've seen is basically you will have a growth product manager. For example, we have a growth product manager. We have an engagement product manager. Growth product manager's job is creating loops.
Yeah.
and that person will work very closely with the head of growth or VP growth or director growth, whatever the level is. But director growth also will look at what channels are performing and how, and will keep the overall sanity around it. But lines are definitely blurred, not with respect to product marketing. I think product marketing has a very, very specific role, which is, we don't look, you come on a website, you tell exactly what it is, right? And you say it in a beautiful, easy way. Like Loom says, say it with video.
Yeah.
I think that's a product marketing job. Like, I can't keep going on and say, hey, we are a video creation software. We are the best online video creation software. It's all like, you say something, it starts there, right? And it comes down to, I think that product marketing role still comes down across the journey and not just one touch point. And again, lines are blurred. We can say that's not a product marketing person. There is a content writer person, or that's a UX person, but they all function very, very closely.
Good.
It's just a counterpart on the same team. At least at InVideo, and I would not know too much, but at least at InVideo, that is how it is.
No, that's a fair point. Ugam, first of all, thank you for joining on screen.
Yeah, sure.
You have been a very, what should I say, loyal participant in SaaS Talks. Ugam, I don't know whether you were the anonymous attendee.
Yeah.
Okay, you were. So I will actually go back to Rishen's comment, and if you can clarify your question further.
Sure. So just to give you an introduction, so I'm a founder of Preimage, and we are actually working in 3D reconstruction industry. It's basically a computer vision approach where you take in photos and generate 3D models. Now, the core part of our platform is to increase the compute and storage. All the features, etc., that you build should be surrounded around it. The goal of product marketing is to focus on ensuring that the features that your product have, the people are actually using them, and that drives the adoption of the product. Now, if you go from a product-led strategy approach, like you start with the bulk of the top of the funnel and try to move down people across it, but the features, etc., don't.
I think we might have just
lost Ugam. In the meantime, can I go ahead with a question?
Sure, please go ahead, Arpit, in the meantime.
So, guys, one, Sanket, thoda left field se. At some point, does community start becoming important? Because one would imagine these are loyal product users, they like the product. If you look at, most scaled Canva or Figma kind of companies, there are these very active communities. So from a defensibility point of view, is that something which is important? And if yes, at what point do you start thinking about it? And I think you may have lost Sanket now. Ashani.
No, you have not lost me. You have not lost me. The problem with this is that we thought for the longest time that we have cracked community. We actually also told Rishen when he was at Sequoia that we have cracked community, but we haven't. And that makes it difficult, but community is important. Again, the core part of the community is simple. What is the problem that you are solving for the community? For companies like Figma, Weebly, Webflow, all of them, right? It's inspiration and problems. How do I do this? How do I do that? Inspiration and feedback. That is the problem community solve in this in this aspect. By the way, my observation is that no one has largely cracked community in, like, if we talk about Figma, like, not yet cracked community, not yet cracked. I have not seen much about Canva either. Shopify communities are pretty strong, at least. Oberlo communities are strong, but I haven't, and again, I haven't cracked it. But is it important? It's very important for overall engagement and feedback for you. For example, like, community of people are super helpful with respect to testing a feature, voting a feature, telling the problems. They're very vocal. And they definitely care for you more. And again, I will tell you where we have failed also, and we should have done better, or we should have predicted it. For the first 5,000-6,000 users, InVideo community was raging. It was amazing. When it went to 25,000 users, it actually died down. So we are introspecting what we did wrong, but we definitely did something wrong, or we definitely missed a point. So and I really don't know the right answer, but yeah, for the first 5,000 users, our community was raging. It was super helpful, and the feedback that came from there was amazing.
Got it.
Ugam, back to you. Sorry, I know we lost you, but maybe if in a short couple of sentences you can complete your comment or question.
Yeah, I was just saying about that, right? I mean, the product marketing major focus is to drive features, and the product-led growth generally is for more user satisfaction in a very short amount of time. How do you bring about the best marriage of both, where people can try out the features that work for them best, where you have multiple features, in an approach of product-led where people find gratification very easily?
Rishen, I think you should take it up. I really don't know the right answer here.
I'm not sure if I understood the question correctly, but is the question that you've got 10 features and how do you balance between someone trying all 10 out and seeing gratification from your product?
Exactly, because especially in a B2B product, you need to have those features. But
no, that's what you think.
Yeah,
that's what you think.
Let's take HubSpot as an example over here, right? Like I think HubSpot has now almost 25 or 26 SKUs. They've got like so many SKUs. I'd be surprised if they wait for someone to see gratification from all SKUs before they think someone is successful with their product. I think if someone sees gratification with 1, 2, 3, how many other SKUs, there's some amount of success that's there. And it's not necessary that all 27 SKUs are meant for every single customer of HubSpot also at the same time.
नहीं आप ये सोचो ना, सिंपल है कि आप ये सोचो कि अगर उसको जर्नी में वो फीचर जरूरी है, आपको लगता है कि लाइक फीचर होना जरूरी है, बट इफ दैट फीचर इज देयर and if the user feels like using it, they will use it. If that feature solves the problem, they will actually use it. At least not everyone, a large, 20% of them will use it and get gratification, and you will understand that I need to change it. But if it's in the journey, and if that is the feature that's solving the problem, they will use it.
Like to Sanket's point, I'm not sure if getting someone to use all 10 features is
even the right way to do it. Yeah.
That's fair.
I know that Vishal Arora has been trying to, he has raised his hand. For some reason, every time I press promote to panelist, it's not working out. So Vishal, in case you are allowed to talk directly right now, if you just want to articulate your question, that's fine, because I'm not able to get you on the screen.
Oh, he's on the screen now. At least I can see.
Unless this was, you just pressed it by mistake. Okay, I guess no answer from Vishal. So we're going to take on Arpit. If you have a question in mind, you go ahead.
I have a question, and probably not in the Q&A panel, and there are so many of those. But and both Sanket and Rishen, it's for both of you guys. Going back to metrics, when you are at the distribution stage, right, because you do need to spend a lot more time before you seriously start thinking of monetization. Any heuristics on what kind of capital efficiency should one expect? Because in a sales-led growth motion, I think there are well-defined, I would argue, benchmarks to 1 million ARR, 5 million ARR, 10 million ARR, different kinds of SMB enterprise, and so on and so forth. But just even though it might not be very well stabilized, but any ranges or even directional stuff would be helpful.
Of what I have understood and realized, I think this is a very, very founder persona problem. It is very founder centric. It is very, I don't think. Okay, so let me give you an example, right? Like, and that is my persona. I think I always at least keep telling myself, I like longer runways. Okay, and I would not want to spend money where I know I can't make money. Okay, like overall. So I would then accept a plateau and try to figure out another channel, but not scale that. Now, I don't know how everyone else works. Maybe you can call it a branding exercise and you're not looking at it. I don't know how it works. But essentially, you don't want to lose money for sure. If I'm answering that question, I don't think it would be. I don't think PLG companies would think about it differently. They would change their acquisition source unless there is an experiment that I've done to 30% of the users or 20% of the users, and I know I attain a CAC LTV there if I do XYZ, and so I am growing and I have a full visibility why I'm doing it. So it's more of a science. We would go ahead and do it, but not otherwise.
Understood. Okay.
And ideally, your pricing also needs to. There needs to be a channel pricing fit also. So you can't go to certain channels if there is no pricing fit. So depending on that, also you need to come up with pricing. So I don't think there's a direct answer here.
Understood. Rishen, any sense from your
Yeah, I think I'll just build on what Sanket is saying. I think the founder and persona of that founder is very important, but I think it's also very contextual to what's the market you're playing in, how deep is that market, how competitive is it, how easily is capital accessible, how long-term is the revenue that you'll generate from your customers. I think it's super subjective. Like if you're a dev tools company wherein you know you can win 30-40% of the market with enough engagement, you'd be fine spending hundreds of millions of dollars even if you can to attract kind of growth. But if on the flip side you're in a hyper competitive market and you know that revenue is hard to come by, you'd want to be very economical. So I think it's
on that note, Rishen, on that note, really, which is the PLG company who spent like millions of dollars in ads and you started using it? Think about one company. Give me a name of a company that you started using because of their like heavy marketing versus organically identifying a PLG company and using it most likely.
Yeah, so I'm probably not the best example of here because I started using Canva when I saw ads.
Okay, got it.
I saw there was a span in 2016 where Canva was basically all you saw on Instagram. Like that's all you saw.
No, Rishen, but think about it, right? For every Canva, you probably did not see an ad of Typeform, you did not see an ad of Zoom, you did not see an ad of Airtable, you did not see an ad of Notion.
I agree.
Like the large range actually, these companies are quite cost efficient, at least on the acquisition side, or should be, because only if you have cracked that is when you are building actually a very large company. Otherwise, you are most likely getting there. Like either you are getting to there or building a large company, but
I completely agree with you, Sanket, but that efficiency is also a function of what your denominator is, right? Like if Canva is doing $500 million a year in revenue, they can comfortably spend $40-50 million a year on advertising and it's still super efficient. But $40-50 million a year on advertising is a serious amount of money on advertising.
Correct, but it depends, right? It depends on CAC LTV then.
Exactly what I'm saying. So it depends on the denominator you have at that point. So I'm sure that these companies do spend money. They might not be spending it in ways that we consider traditional performance marketing. Like Figma invested a ton of money in its design community, right? They sponsored events. That is also for me a form of earn to grow.
It is.
So Arpit, just to add some diversity to your question, I have a slightly different answer than what Sanket and Rishen both do. And see, in general, at least, my gut is that the capital requirement in building a product-led growth is slightly higher in the early stages, and they can become very efficient later on.
Correct.
With two massive exceptions, though, to my statement. One is that there are certain kinds of companies which have very strong network effects just by definition.
Correct.
And for those of you who were born at that point in time, if you go back to Hotmail, Hotmail had a standard feature that will say that it is sent through Hotmail. Look at Superhuman, right? There are many of these apps. There is just an inherent virality, and there you can grow massively with very little capital expenditure. Second example that Rishen referred to, if you look at a lot of developer-led companies, their distribution today happens through a GitHub and many other communities.
Community.
And I think developer community is one which likes to use free products. And there is a very strong word of mouth in that community in general, right? So if you look at even the capital efficiency of companies like Hasura, Postman, etc., they were amazingly efficient for the distribution they got. But outside of these kinds of examples, the thing is that in a product-led growth, initially there is a bit of a distribution first goal that you want to achieve.
Correct.
And not for distribution's sake. And I'll quote actually two people here. One is Yamini Rangan of HubSpot. And second, what's happening to me, Krish of ChargeBee on this thing. Right? What happens is that as you are building your funnel, in this process, you also realize that there are a lot of undesirable people in that funnel. When you launch a freemium product, how do you know that the people who are coming, they're all relevant? They're all relevant top of the funnel. Who will get to the bottom of the funnel? Probably not, right? So there is a lot of tuning that is required for this engine, which is very data driven. At every stage of that funnel, to get it right, it takes some doing to get that to that point in time. Yeah. Also, depending on the kind of motion that you choose post building top of the funnel, it can be purely product nudges. So one statement, for example, that Yamini made, she said that people who are coming purely through product-led growth, sometimes a free user will become a single paid user, sometimes two. But in practice, they have found that top of the funnel to rarely go beyond 10 users, right? And that is, if it is, so that entire funnel is actually not delivering for more than 10 user kind of licenses. They actually have a completely different funnel when they go for bigger ones. So that the nature of the funnel can also be very different. And at least her take, and this was similar to what Krish articulated, is that if you are going in this direction, and of course there'll be lots of exceptions, I'm making a very generic statement, but in the early stages, be prepared to spend actually a little bit more cash in building the company compared to classical sales-led approach.
No, I'll tell you why. Alok. Like, why did you say, the reason you said that it requires more money is very simple. I think that largely what happens inside these meetings, or when I'm raising around or doing whatever, right, is I've proved monetization. Now, can you please not let me monetize and let me distribute? So basically it is proven. You know, you're not talking, you're talking sense. You said that, look, 20% or 30% of users went through this journey. They paid money, right? It's by choice why I'm not asking for money. If I change that choice, I'll ask for money. We have actually done so large experiments of paywalls that it will drop the conversion to half, but actually increase the growth by like 60-70% of the number of videos created, right? So it is because you choose not to, you're choosing a thing over the other, but it's proven that unit economics makes sense. You are going to make money. These are the numbers you will attend. And that is when you're taking an informed decision. Yeah. Because then you are saying that, oh, wait, when I want to change it, I'm going to remove this book, give it to a product manager and say, please get this executed. And from day after that, usually you will start seeing similar numbers, if not the same, unless like the scale has changed or some channel has changed a lot, right? So it's by choice more than by... Also, by the way, I don't think that HubSpot has a different DNA of a company, and why they don't see more than 2, 8, 10 people come in. For every HubSpot, there is a type form. And for every that, there is also Slack, right? So, or Calendly, right? For that matter. So they don't see it because of it's a different DNA of a company. Like HubSpot requires some amount of configuration. It requires some amount of understanding if you are using the CRM and things like that. So mostly the users who are actually being successful to use the product in that state are are smaller people who don't want to then go in and actually do a complete setup.
Got it. I think in the amount of time we have, we will not be able to do justice to the next question. Sure. And we always promise people that we will end by 6 p.m. and not go any further to be respectful to everyone's time. But I still have like shitload of questions myself that I wanted to ask. We are all trying to learn, at least I'm trying to learn what PLG is. How does it become relevant? And I can see a lot of questions on the Q&A board as well. But Rishen and Sanket, thank you so much for agreeing to be part of today's discussion and sharing your thoughts so freely. Thanks also to everybody who attended. And one closing remark I'll make, which we do in every of these sessions. Please do suggest topics which are relevant to you, which we can cover in the future SaaS talks. You can write to us, you can tweet us, you can put a comment on LinkedIn, whatever works for you, please do that. Your opinion does matter in selecting topics that actually do matter to you. Today's session also came because a lot of people had actually talked about it in the past. With that, thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of Friday and your weekend. And we look forward to seeing you again in a few weeks with the next SaaS talks. Thank you.